Thank you for being back in part 2. Just want to apologize. Sometimes my camera gets a little glitchy, sometimes Dr. Danenberg. So I hope you stay with us because this is very, very important stuff. Dr. Danenberg is here today to explain how he saved his own life after a September 2018 incurable bone cancer. His diagnosis was given him 3 to 6 months to live. And I invited this impressive human to share his life tips because I'm fascinated that some believe veganism is the way to go. We better eat plant-based, and that's the healthiest way to be. And some feel their life was saved from cancer and other issues using meat and meat organs. So I want to talk to Dr. Danenberg. I'll explain more about him. He's an amazing human being. He has a website. He counsels patients. And he, in my view, saved his own life because it's what now, 4 to 5 years later, Dr. Danenberg? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Just about 4 years. Yep.
4 years to to be given 3 to 6 months to live. He thought he was so healthy, eating well like we all do. And the reason I asked him here and the reason why I have my show is I had pretty severe anxiety. So now I do hypnotherapy. I do nutrition tips. You can find me at growthfactor.org or growthfactor.org@gmail.com. And I want to ask Dr. Danenberg, the biggest question I have is veganism and plant-based the way to go? And that's the best way to be. We're going to avoid cancer and colon cancer. We're going to avoid heart disease. Or is eating more meat and meat organs the best way to go? What do you think, Dr. Danenberg? And maybe you can give us some personal stories of patients.
So I'm not going to give you my personal opinion, but let me just tell you this. The science clearly shows that the human species has evolved for about 2.5 million years. And there are remnants of human skulls dating back to 300,000 years ago, which would be the first skull of a Homo sapien, which is our immediate species. Those records that are archaeological, biological, physiological, that can be identified, where I actually published in a recent paper in 2021 that clearly showed, without a doubt, the human species, being omnivore, had a predilection to eating animal-based foods. The animal protein, the animal fat, the organs, the bone marrow, the cartilage, all of these elements, nose to tail, from animals is what, are those nutrients that allowed the human species to thrive, especially to become physically and mentally who we are today. We have a DNA that basically is our blueprint that is dependent on these nutrients to create the metabolic and other biological pathways of our body. To change that science to something that is 100% plant-based, that is contrary to our DNA and is not reflected in the science of evolution. Now, people can question what I have to say, but the facts are there and they can just read the papers and make their own opinion. But I will tell you that the way to go, in my opinion, is to follow this record of human evolution, and that is to be basically an animal-based society and eating some plants that are still healthy in a smaller proportion. And that's what my Better Belly Blueprint is all about. I have a patient that, or I would say a client, that came to me several months ago. She is almost my age. She's in her early 70s. I'm 75 now. But in her early 70s, she has been a vegan for 30 years. She came to me only after she realized that her body's musculature and physiology were literally breaking down to the point that she was getting pretty sick and only realized now that her healthy veganism was not healthy at all. And there are many people that have been a vegan for many, many decades, or at least many years, realizing some of the consequences after the fact. If you're not getting the nutrients you need, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden you get sick. If you don't get the nutrients you need, it's cumulative, and all of a sudden is not all of a sudden for a manifestation of a disease. It occurs very, very slowly until that disease manifests. For example, if you are eating burgers, fries, and a Coke every day, and that's the way you eat, you're not going to get sick right away. But after several decades, all of a sudden, your body starts to tell you there's a problem. Your waistline gets a little larger. Your blood pressure may be off normal. Your ability to process glucose may start to become pre-diabetic. There are many things that happen down the road, 10, 20 years later, after the fact you started eating unhealthy. So this is a sad state where this woman only realized after 30 years that her healthy diet was not healthy at all. And her whole family was a vegan. And it turns out that she changed and she's getting better, but she still has to convince her family that that's not a healthy way of life. Because, as you know, there are many more plant-based people in the world than animal-based people. There are a lot of reasons for that, I'm sure. But in my opinion, we are who we are, and we are the way we are because of evolution and our DNA. And who am I to conflict with that philosophy? And that's the way I want to create nutrition for my body.
And I love talking about this topic with you because as I said in part one, I called it anxiety. I self-diagnosed. If I'd gone to a physician, as I think back, it probably would have been depression. I probably would have been on pills, and rightfully so, because, excuse me, Dr. Danenberg, I really wasn't doing well. And then I started listening to doctors like you, patients, reading books, and I found online that people who are struggling like I was with anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia, depression, paranoia, and a whole host of other brain disorders, once they change their gut microbiome, that's when they improve. So same with me. I went from being vegan because I thought plant-based was the best way to go. And then since it didn't really work for me, my iron was low a lot. I couldn't really donate blood to the Red Cross. They would reject me a lot. When I was pregnant, I had to pull over on the side of the road and have my parents pick me up because I was about to fall asleep. Being vegan just wasn't working for me. And very slowly, I reintroduced meat. I guess it changed my gut microbiome because now I feel fine, and I still have the same problems. I have the problems everybody else has. I could list them for you, which I'm not going to, of course, but we have challenges in life and we need to do something about it. So I tell people, I still have those challenges. They change from moment to moment or month to month, but I can handle it better. And I believe it's based on how I'm eating, because that's the only thing that changed. I started to increase animal products. And what I say to people is, you know what? People don't like to sacrifice animals. But in my family, I have 4 children, so there's 6 of us. If we don't sacrifice animals, our health is being sacrificed. Because my son, the doctor started talking about IBD or IBS, which is along the line of Crohn's. And I thought, nope, we're not going there. We're going to change how we eat. And for me, like I said, it was anxiety. And so we've changed how we eat. And now we don't have those issues in the bathroom. We don't have my, mom who's stressed out and filled with anxiety because we changed our gut microbiome. So I want to ask you about that. Have you heard of the microbiome of vegans versus meat eaters? And have you heard of people changing their mental state of mind?
Well, first of all, when it comes to the gut microbiome, there is a definite interreaction or relationship with the neural tissues, the brain. So a healthy gut can produce healthy neurotransmitters for a healthier brain, and vice versa. There is communication between the gut and the brain and the gut. Those facts are well established. There are several psychiatrists that I know that are in the field of writing books about their experiences with their patients that have actually moved away from prescribing prescription drugs for a variety of mental illnesses and changed the diet to a more animal-based diet, which is, animals have to be raised properly and humanely and so on and so forth, but creating a healthier microbiome affecting the neurotransmitters and other functions of the brain. So there is a direct relation to that. There are many other research papers that show a variety of anti-nutrients in certain foods like grains and processed sugars and some of the nuts and seeds that are high in oxalates and other individual types of plants that create issues with the gut microbiome, creating damage in the epithelial barrier of the gut, creating a leakage into the bloodstream of what's called lipopolysaccharides, or LPS, which are highly toxic, not toxic to the body in a healthy gut because it's excreted when you have a bowel movement, but leaking into the blood system is highly toxic, creates the systemic chronic inflammatory result from the immune system pouring all of this cytokines and so on and so forth into the body, affecting every organ system, including the mouth. So you can have dysbiosis, which is what we're talking about, bad garden of bacteria in the gut, dysbiosis affecting the bloodstream with lipopolysaccharides, and it will affect the mouth and changes the microbiome in the mouth and creates inflammation and bleeding gums without any other dental issues. Now, if you have bad dentistry in your mouth and fillings that are breaking down and so on and so forth, that can initiate problems in the mouth and progress to the rest of the body. But if you have a healthy mouth to start with, but you don't have a healthy gut, you can develop gingivitis or gum inflammation, bleeding gums, just because the gut is unhealthy, not necessarily starting in the mouth. The mouth is actually manifesting the damage from the gut. And the gut's damage not only goes to the mouth, but it goes to every other organ system, including the brain. And so many autoimmune diseases are completely related to that breakdown in the gut and the epithelial barrier. So diet does affect the gut. Other things affect the gut, like we said, like emotional stress, excessive exercise, not efficient exercise, poor circadian rhythm, poor sleep habits, so many different things, chemicals that are in the water that we're drinking, the food that we're eating, the air that we're breathing. Many irritants can damage the gut microbiome.
You know, what I'm hearing, I'll go on camera for a moment. So what I'm hearing from you, what I'm going to summarize what we just talked about, but we have a lot more to talk about, Dr. Danenberg, is that if we don't sacrifice animals, we will likely be sacrificing our own gut and our own mental health. I know that's true with myself and my family. Like I said, I was having mental issues and one of my children was having gut issues because I thought, what's interesting, what you just made me realize is when I was a vegan and a vegetarian, I made the assumption that all fruits and vegetables were healthy. Brown rice, all rices. I just gave plant-based eating a pass. And I made a lot of assumptions. And you just talked a lot about leaky gut and glyphosate and oxalates and all these things that either come from the chemicals in the food or come from within plant-based food. I really made a lot of assumptions, and my family's health was struggling mentally and physically. So I'm glad that we're talking about that today. But I want to do a screen share to not only talk about your website and how you help people, but something that I'm surprised some people still don't know. Let's go here real quick. So this is, can you tell us a little bit about this? And is this healthy for us? Is it not healthy for us when we consume products that contain these oils?
So one of the problems that you're showing right now are different processed vegetable and seed oils. These oils are very high in what's called linoleic acid. It's a type of polyunsaturated fatty acid that is in high concentrations is very damaging to our fat cells as well as our mitochondria, and can create many metabolic diseases by itself. These oils, this linoleic acid, this fatty acid, if it is in these proportions of these oils, accumulates in the body. It's probably the most dominant factor creating insulin resistance and also, like I said, other chronic diseases like cardiovascular disease. Bad stuff.
I think what I realized looking back is, as a vegan and then eventually vegetarian, which wasn't working for my family, Dr. Danenberg, we weren't looking at every box and bag. And if we were, now that I look today, my children know now, they look, if there's canola oil, if there's grapeseed, if there's sunflower, all these oils, my children will reject it. Of course, from time to time, they're going to have the French fries from a restaurant. Almost every time we ask, 98%, what oil do you use? It's always soy, corn, canola. So I tell my kids, hey, we're going to eat this today, but just understand, if you're feeling any anxiety, if you're having any skin issues, if you're having trouble in the bathroom, it's because of these, most likely these oils. So when I cut them out, because I stopped eating those foods that have these processed oils in it, I feel so much better. Like I said, my anxiety, which lasted all day long with the doom feeling in my gut, it's gone because I'm eating different. And so I'm happy I'm able to educate my children. But I think the bigger point is, a lot of times with people who are vegan and vegetarian, they're not looking at the ingredients at the restaurant that they're going to. The vegan restaurant most likely is using these oils. I hope not. And the boxed and bagged foods are using these oils. They're not using, well, can you tell us what are the good oils, Dr. Danenberg, as I add your website here?
Well, the oils are the animal fats. So, oil is liquid at room temperature. So I'm not saying any oil is really healthy. Even olive oil and avocado oil, which are primarily monosaturated oils, still have some polyunsaturated omega-6 fatty acids. As a matter of fact, olive oil and avocado oil, in their proportion of polyunsaturated fats, they have linoleic omega-6s to omega-3s at a ratio of 13:1, and a healthy ratio would be maybe 2:1. So they still have a lot of these unhealthy oils. If you want to cook, you should be cooking in ghee. If you're not familiar with ghee, it's basically butter where you have separated the butter, which is, or the animal fat, from some residual protein and carbohydrate. It's pure golden liquid that will become solid or almost solid at room temperature, but it is a fantastic cooking method to use, like you would think of butter, but ghee is more pure. So ghee is great. A variety of other animal fats like suet and tallow are great. These are fats that are saturated for the most part, which are healthy fats when it comes from animals that are grass-fed, not grain-fed, not animals that are injected with hormones and antibiotics, because those chemicals will reside in their fat as well as their animal protein. But you have to have these saturated fats from healthy animals, but they are the healthiest methods of cooking with fats than using all the other oils that you just demonstrated.
So I'm going to share your website. I want to ask you 2 questions about it. Can you tell us, how do people reach out to you, how you help them? And then I want to ask you about butter.
Sure. So again, you can reach me at drdanenberg.com, drdanenberg.com. Basically, in the navigation bar that you're showing, where it says work with Dr. Al, you can schedule a 12-week program with me. You can schedule individual consults with me. I explain how you can fill out the information online, a questionnaire, a food journal, send me your dental x-rays, and I'll have time with you with a Zoom virtual chat to go over everything and address your concerns. Again, I'm not diagnosing a disease. I'm just helping coach you with a method to improve your immune system, which will improve everything else that's functioning in your body.
Thank you. So I'm so happy people who want to reach out to you are able to do that. And you talked about oils. What about, is margarine healthy? Is butter healthy?
Yeah, so margarine is junk food. Margarine is nothing more than a variety of types of vegetable oils. So it's a very harmful food product. Now, butter is very healthy. Butter, as long as it's from grass-fed cattle, butter has good, healthy saturated fats. Conjugated linoleic acid is one of the omega-6 fatty acids that's very healthy. And it has the ability to burn or heat it to a higher temperature without becoming damaged from the heat. And it's a great cooking method, and it certainly tastes great.
Wonderful. Okay, I want to talk a little bit more about the gut. What I noticed, my personal experience, I'm not carnivore because I'll never be an extremist, you know, extremely vegan, extremely carnivore. I try to mix a little bit of everything. But what I did do to save my mental health and my son's gut is drastically increase the ruminant meat, which in my view doesn't include pork. It's the split hooves with the 4 stomachs, which means ruminant meat. Why the word ruminant? We get from, you know, we get from that word, we ruminate, you know, people who think a little too much and ruminate on things. So that's the 4 stomach animal. So for me, changing over to increasing the red meats really helped me tremendously, where I don't need a, what's it called, Lexapro or a Zoloft. I was able to use food to help me with my gut. Ooh.
I have a new book that's coming out in a couple of weeks called Eat as If Your Life Depends on It. And it's basically a summary of man's evolution, man's and woman's evolution to where we are, and the diet that is most appropriate for the human species. And what I've done with my diet, and I go into a good bit of description on how to transition to that way of eating, which would be the Better Belly Blueprint concept, literally on a week-by-week basis, so that you don't jump in 100% and all of a sudden you don't eat anything you used to eat and everything is new. You just slowly remove things and add things. So I have this all laid out in this very, very short book. I think it's like 60 pages. That's going to be published, I think, in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So I think that that's a good guide for a person that wants to change the way they're eating, with the rationale and all the references that supports that, and do it slowly and conveniently. And I can even describe in that book some of the side effects that you may have initially if you're not used to eating certain foods, certain things that you might expect to happen.
So what you can expect based on my personal experience that might affect you as well. The more I increase the meat, there's less going on in the bathroom. There's no, sorry to be a little graphic, there's no gas, there's no wiping. I know that sounds kind of graphic, but I just noticed, wow, when I was more plant-based, it was kind of a mess there in the bathroom.
Yeah, so when you're eating a lot of fiber and other foods that are producing a lot of gases, you have a lot of gas and you have a lot of bulk in a stool. When you're eating foods that are lower in fiber or even no fiber, you don't have any of those issues that are happening. I do want to make a comment about fiber. Most people think fiber is critical for our diet. Interestingly, there are some studies that show that, first of all, fiber can be very irritating to the tissues of the intestines. As the fiber goes through the body, it can create inflammation and not only bulk, but just a lot of inflammation in the surface of the epithelial barriers. But fiber in a microbiome that metabolizes fiber will create short chain fatty acids that are very healthy. But if you're an animal-based eater, your microbiome is a little different in your gut. It's not so much different species, but different ratios of species. And those species will now ferment amino acids, which are the breakdown of the protein, will ferment amino acids to create the same short chain fatty acids that the other bacteria would produce from fiber. So you don't have to have these large quantities of fiber daily to be healthy. All you have to do is look at some primal societies like the Hadza, who eat very little fiber and they have extremely healthy guts. And also, by the way, they have very little, if any, chronic diseases. There are other societies in the world that are relatively primal in their way of living that don't have chronic disease, that are eating very high animal-based diets. Now, there are some societies like the Inuit that used to eat maybe a 95% animal-based diet that were extremely healthy. Yet in the last 50 years, many of these people started to become more westernized, started eating a lot of processed foods, and their diets have changed to create a lot of chronic disease in these people. So these examples are, if you're eating a healthy diet, without the fiber, if it's high animal based, you have very healthy digestive systems and very little chronic disease. If you go back to eating, let's say, a high plant-based diet that maybe has a lot of anti-nutrients and maybe even a lot of processed foods, all of a sudden you become very unhealthy. So I'm not saying that you can't eat plants. I am saying you must eat animal-based foods. And those animal-based foods need to be sourced from healthy animals.
I'm going to give a little commentary more about Dr. Danenberg. So I hope we get to where I want to get to, and that is to talk about wheat and also treatments for your, I don't even want to say the C word, the thing you had going through your body that you don't recommend. You do recommend and you don't recommend. So let me first just say that the more I talk to you, really encouraging me, the more we put animals on this pedestal, I cannot sacrifice these animals. I can only feed them and pet them. I do think our mind can be affected for a lot of us, and our gut, and for some of us, our skin. If we don't, again, I say go to read Dr. Danenberg's book, see his interviews, and also Dr. Terry Walls. How does she go from a very healthy plant-based vegan, a clean vegan, to dying from multiple sclerosis and having to introduce liver once a week and meat once a week? So I think of her and a whole host of other people I can think of. But I want to let you know more about Dr. Danenberg. And again, I want to get into the wheat and treatments you don't recommend. Dr. Al rejected all chemotherapy. And you can see he's thriving today. It's 4 or 5 years later after he was given 3 to 6 months to live. And in June 2014, I wanted you to know Dr. Al received the Certified Functional Medicine Practitioner. So he's also now a CFMP designation, as well as the certification as a certified primal health coach. In July 2017, Electra Press released his book, Crazy Good Living, which is based on ancestral nutrition and lifestyle. In August 2020, he published 2 mini books, one of them that I read, ebooks on Amazon for download, Better Belly Blueprint and Is Your Gut Killing You? And I read that on the app called the Kindle app, thanks to Dr. Danenberg. I'm very modern now. So if you can tell us about wheat, and then also treatments you used in your journey to health that you recommend and don't recommend.
Well, wheat is just one of the gluten products that have been shown to damage the gut microbiome, specifically the epithelial barrier, creating large openings, which would cause leakage from the gut into the circulatory system. Colloquially, it would be called a leaky gut. Wheat is basically a grain that has been only eaten in the last 10,000 years. It was not a food product that was part of our evolution. today wheat is highly hybridized, and it's not the same wheat that was probably grown 10,000 years ago, but it is a destructive element in the gut. In addition, it has a variety of chemicals called phytates. Wheat binds, those phytates bind to minerals. Many people that they're eating a diet with bread, for example, and they have other foods that have minerals, the phytates will bind to those minerals, many of those minerals, and not allow them to get absorbed into the body. It's not a food product I recommend. It's not a food product that is healthy for the gut, and therefore, certainly, it's not a food that our ancestors would have been eating, primal ancestors.
So my second question is, because I read a lot about you before we interviewed, reading one of your books and listening to your interviews and reading about you, it seems like you use some treatments that you thought might be healthy for immunity, but perhaps may not. So can you tell us what you recommend or don't recommend, or your personal experience with what you've tried on your journey to health?
Well, when I was beginning to create these unconventional cancer protocols, I was getting information from different sources that literally suggested that I would be taking 40, 50 different supplements a day. And these are man-made supplements for a variety of nutrient issues. And I did that for maybe 6 months with not very good success, and felt like it was not healthy for my gut. What's interesting, if you look at the supplement bottles, you go to a functional medicine doctor and they tell you all these nutrients that you need, and then they sell you 12 or 15 different bottles of nutrients that you need. If you look at those bottles, not only are most of those supplements synthetic, and if they're not synthetic, they're extracted, and they're not in the proper ratios of where they were in the animal-based world. But if you look at the bottle, you'll see another part of the nutrition label that says other ingredients. And under other ingredients, there are a lot of chemicals. These are enzymes and preservatives and emulsifiers and a variety of things that are chemically destructive to the gut. And now you're taking, let's say, 10, 15 different supplements. All of those other ingredients are additive, so that you're literally